This is the Mosen Mortgage Program with Sarah Mosen. Mosen Mortgage is licensed in several states for residential and commercial purchases and refinancing. Call 800-662-9550. And now, here's your host, Sarah Mosen.
Great to be back here again, and so very grateful to have June Hunt, founder of Hope for the Heart, a worldwide counseling ministry impacting over 60 countries with resources in more than 20 languages. June, you've been heard all over for so many years, and I am so very grateful that you are able to be on air with me today. How are you today?
Wonderful. It's an honor to be with you talking about something we all deal with
yes.
Day in, day out.
Very true, very true. Financial freedom and managing money, we talk about that daily with our show here. My brother and I started a company many years ago, and so I'm grateful that you have such thought-provoking ideas and concepts. What are the major myths about money that you think folks, our listeners, should be aware of?
Sometimes it's things that people have heard by well-meaning individuals, such as, if you live a godly life, you will experience financial gain.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, based on the Bible, literally, the Bible says that godliness is not a means to financial gain. So this is actually like a false doctrine that's taught by false teachers who I'm sure don't mean to be teaching something false, but and this is, I'm looking at 1 Timothy 6,
mm-hmm.
which says if anyone teaches a different doctrine, and then you find out what the doctrine is, that godliness is a means of financial gain. And what you see is, instead, we are told in verse 6 of 1 Timothy 6 that godliness with contentment is great gain.
Right.
So don't prioritize or just don't assume that if you're a godly person, which is actually taught by some people, that then you deserve a Cadillac. And I've heard teachers say this, and it gives me great concern, because this is not in line with even the witness of Jesus or the disciples.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't end up with Rolls Royces. And be a godly person, though, and then you will have contentment. The second one would be money is the root of all evil. And some people they just go, I don't even want to think about money. No, it's the love of money. That's what the Bible says. The love of money is
mm-hmm.
the root of all kinds of evil. And it says, some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. So, in other words, if you're obsessed about money, that's where it really becomes a problem. But
right.
It's the love of money. A third would be, if I ever have enough money, then I'll be happy. Well, happiness doesn't come from your financial situation. All you have to do is look at why would so many millionaires commit suicide?
Mm-hmm.
Money does not buy happiness. It's merely to be used as a tool to be here responsibly for why God has us here. And the last of the money myth, I like thinking of money myth. The fourth money myth is you must borrow money from the bank and pay it back as a way of establishing good credit references. I was told that at one time. But, just to borrow money would seem kind of counter to what the Bible even teaches, because the Bible says the borrower is a slave to the lender. So borrowing and paying back money isn't always necessary to establish credit. Most lenders are more than pleased to extend credit to consumers in order to collect inflated interest rates over an extended period of time. So I think the issue is our culture is one of, it's okay to borrow, but then many people become a slave to that mindset. and we've got to get out of that and literally go by what God says. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Be able to be content with whatever you have.
So, what do you think, what lifestyles lead to debt, June? What would you share with our listeners on that?
There are several problematic lifestyles. In other words, just using money to keep up social appearances. Actually, just spending money to feel important. There are those who, it's like once they have a purchase, it's a temporary high for them. And so if you feel that way, you've got to go, oh, wait, there's something wrong here. I need to readjust. Obviously, I know people who have used money to manipulate others, to get favors, and that's sad. That's not how money should be used. Or you know, I think about one woman who kept giving money to a church, and then she would get these plaques. And I'm talking about she was giving about everything that would come in following the death of a husband, and so she loved her plaques, but then she would have to borrow from others just to eat. Well, it was using money to appear righteous in the eyes of others, and it's a faulty type of mindset.
Right. I mean, we do see that a lot. With your, having financial freedom, what do you think are the 4 principles that would lead to financial freedom?
Well, number 1 has to be to learn contentment. Now, what that means is you remind yourself, God owns everything.
Right.
That's what the Bible actually says. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. That's Psalm 24. So if we realize, okay, if God owns it all, I am going to be as responsible as you want me to be, Lord. I will be responsible with what I have, but I'm going to choose to be content, not comparing with what other people have. By the way, Philippians 4 says, I've learned to be content whatever the circumstance. So we have to say, okay, how do I do that? Well, besides learning contentment, number 2, exercise self-control.
Right.
What that means is if you don't have it, you don't spend it. Start by mentally transferring ownership of everything you have to God, emotionally, mentally, and then you make a new goal for managing your finances, and that is staying away from temptation to overspend. Like, I love Cheetos.
Right.
I love Cheetos. I can't afford Cheetos from a diet standpoint. So I will not have them at my house. I don't know what it is about those little munchies, but even when I'm given a bag, I won't open the bag because I just know that they'll, a moment on the lips, forever on the hips. and so I have to determine where are my tempting areas. What is too tempting for me, like to say, oh, no, I know if I go here, I will spend much more. And therefore, the Bible even says, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. That's Jesus speaking in Luke 12. So, and he starts out, watch out. So be on your guard and just observe, where do I have a tendency to literally fall into the temptation of spending what I should not be spending. A third area would be just practicing stewardship, meaning if you see yourself as I am accountable to God for how I spend every penny, and then you return the first tenth of your earnings to God and reserve a portion for savings, and then have you ever made a budget? I've helped people literally for the first time, adults, set up a budget. And those who are in debt, over time, they become overjoyed at seeing that, because they see where their money's going and they hold to the budget, it made all the difference in the world. So a last point would be, when you give to the work of the Lord, give joyously, realizing some people are imprisoned for their faith and they have nothing. So whatever you give, don't do it to let other people know that you're giving. Give secretly,
right?
But give cheerfully, not reluctantly or under pressure.
How did you learn about managing money, June?
Mine would be a bizarre way. Not one that most people would identify with. I was not given an allowance growing up, and there was a point at which my mother married my actual father when I was about 13, and he would say periodically, he was double my mom's age, and he was a dictator and sometimes cruel, and he would say, "Your mother is mentally ill today," and it just would terrorize me, because his eldest son from a first marriage was institutionalized for years and years. At that point, 20 years. So I was afraid that my father was going to institutionalize my mother. Therefore, I thought, I'm afraid of what money can buy, which is power, and could buy some doctor to agree with my father, just to get my mom out of the way. And I hated what I thought the prospect could be. So I saved. I never spent any money. I mean, I saved and saved. Go to college. I wouldn't buy an ice cream sundae. I wouldn't. I mean, like they'd have these ice cream sandwiches or little cookies or whatever. I would not spend a penny. Everything went to my defense fund. Mm-hmm. I established, and I told no one for years about my defense fund, so that if my father really acted on his accusations, and Mother was as sound as could be. She was sweet. She had women get around her who were authentic Christians. She began to grow in her faith, but didn't know how to deal with the kind of man that was my father. And he said Christianity's a crutch. I don't have to go by Christian ethics. He was a womanizer, all this stuff. But he gave no money to any of us. So, but the little money I would get, I just saved and saved and saved. So I learned I can be incredibly frugal, and have been. And you have to learn. I just learned to major on the majors, and so that would not be a normal way for people to identify with me. But what I can say is, I used to look and just see how people were spending money, but I viewed it as, no, that's not my money. That's my defense fund for my mother in case Dad ever really does act on his accusations. And but it's a mindset of, and I can say it this way, it's like, if you don't need it, don't buy it.
Right.
And I have a number of things like, if you can cook it, don't order it. That used to be the situation. Now I don't mind as much at times ordering something. But if you're needing to really, really, really save, it's like, if you can use an older one that you have, don't buy a newer one. If you can use a cheaper one, don't buy a costly one. If you can't pay cash for it, don't buy it. If you can repair it, don't replace it. If you can still use it, don't get rid of it. I'm talking about those who are short-sighted, who think only of satisfying today's glittery desires, that make no provision for tomorrow. They can spend unwisely. They can fail to be frugal, and then one day deeply regret where they end up. So what do you do? The better part of wisdom is to make wise choices today, just keeping tomorrow in mind. And this is why the book of Proverbs is so rich. It's filled with the whole point of the book of Proverbs is wisdom. Well, Proverbs 21:20 says, "The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down." The point is, we can kind of, whatever money we have, we can just gulp it and spend it, and yet then when you really need money for tomorrow, it's not there.
So do you think that because we are a very consumer-driven society, I was just sharing this on air for our program on finances, that maybe just uncluttering a little bit, focusing on our faith and our family and not be in the business of just collecting things?
There are very special things that you can do with, as you just said, family. There are times when some of the most memorable times we have is like going to a creek, a lake, and just literally having a picnic out where you're prioritizing time with those you love. And it's not about, okay, what's the newest movie, what's the newest entertainment, what's the biggest and best iPhone or car or trinket, whatever it is. I really believe the concept of becoming free is huge. Specifically, Proverbs 6, verse 5 says, "Free yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the snare of the fowler." We're not to be in bondage. And yet, so many people, there are people who commit suicide because they see no way of getting out of debt. And so, there are steps that you can take that can make such logical sense if you know what those steps are to get out of debt.
Yes, and I think that, as you've said, there's at least 62% of us who have sleepless nights over financial issues because of the debt that's accrued, or the fact that there are ways that we can just spend less and do more. Like you said, spending those moments, those very special, precious moments with family, doesn't have to be something that is going to cost you a lot of money. Just going fishing, maybe with your family. I used to do that with my dad a lot. Enjoyed that, and I certainly think. When you were saying the best ways to get out of debt, how can we get out of debt in a situation where right now the housing market is a boom, the rates are great, people are getting out of debt through their mortgages. What are your suggestions, June?
It's helpful to first just take a full inventory of your own personal debt situation. First look at what do you have, what do you own. And that may mean, car, house, property, etc. I'm thinking about a friend, actually, who she had debt, and she said, "June, there's nothing I can do." Well, we looked at her situation. She lived in a part of town where to sell the house that she had, she could do that and make much more money, invest what she did, and she bought a smaller house. It was fantastic what occurred as a result. So look at what you own. Is there something, a larger item that you could consider downsizing or making better use of? Then look at your income. How much money do you make? How much time per week do you work to obtain the money? Is there a money-producing activity? One woman, her husband was a banker, and he lost his job for 2.5 years. He sent resumes everywhere. He was a wonderful man. He was a Christian, and so it's like, what do we do? Well, she had a gift of sewing, and sewing. You think, sewing? Yeah, sewing. So she made these velvet pillows, sold them at high-end established boutiques. That literally kept the family going for 2.5 years because of the way she looked at what can I do. And it was astonishing to all of them because, it did not take her an immense amount of time to do each pillow, but based on the approach that she took and the quality of what she did, that made such a huge difference. So you do have to consider your lifestyle. And, were you just brought up this way to spend more? You've got to evaluate what can you do without. It may be magazines that are just automatically some kind of a regular magazines that you take every year. You don't need those. I mean, I think the issue is, do you pay others to do something that you could do for yourself?
Right.
Do you eat out, when you could eat less expensively at home? That's usually a huge amount. I asked a man came to me about something, and he worked at a hospital as a physician's assistant, but they were in terrible debt. I said, well, let's just talk about how do you spend your money? And he said, well, I've looked at it. I can't see. I said, well, tell me about Cokes. Do you buy, like, soft drinks? He said, yeah. I said, how many do you drink? About 2 a day, 2 Diet Cokes. And then we figured out how much they were, if they were over $1. And so I said, all right, let's multiply that by 5 days a week, times 52, we could say 50. It was, I said, well, how would you instead like to have, like $100 more? And we started looking at what he did, and he had just never thought about, just to do soft drinks for him. And what about chips? Oh yeah, we always had. Well, that's just error. It is not nutritious. And so we figured out for their family of 5 what would be nutritious food, and it literally was a reorganization of just what they were habitually used to. So can you substitute less expensive services for those you currently are using? Can you substitute less expensive items for any premium products you're using? Can you substitute less expensive forms of entertainment or exercise or enjoyment for those you currently use? Like you say, well, but I just love going to the movies. Okay. Do you have to pay the premium amount and look at it from a lifestyle standpoint? If things are tight, then what about going when the movie is at the bargain movie theater? Or, and there are all kinds of ways to do this. So, I have a friend, she does the before 4 o'clock movies, and she can get those, on Saturday or other certain days of the week. You just literally start looking at future expenditures. What do you see? Is it going to be a wedding in your family? Are you putting back a little money repetitively every week? You say, well, there isn't that money. Yes, there is. You just put it back ahead of, as soon as you get a check, then put back, if it's $1, if it's $10, and you start doing that. You also, I'll just, just looking at, the Bible says, be very careful how you live, not as unwise, but as wise. And I will say also, there are those who will ask for donations. And some people just give to anything that they're asked to give to. At times you have to say no to people so that you can say yes to God.
Right.
I'm going to repeat that. At times you have to say no to people who ask you for personal money. Oh, well, if you love me, you'd give me this. No, do you have peace from God about? Sometimes it is we are enabling a person to live destructively. So if you are giving money to a person where there is dysfunction, where their money then is not spent wisely, you need to say no to people so that you can say yes to God. And that's based on Galatians 1:10. Am I now trying to win the approval of people or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be the servant of Christ.
Thank you for that, June Hunt. I really, really do appreciate you coming on air with me and sharing. I know you have such a busy schedule. I'm grateful for the time that you've given us. And folks, if you have questions, call us here directly at 1-800-662-9550. June, I look forward, hopefully with time, to have you back on air with us as well.
I'd be delighted to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been the Mosen Mortgage Program with Sarah Mosen. Mosen Mortgage is licensed in several states for residential and commercial purchases and refinancing. Call 800-662-9550.